ask a question. I'm going to stop.
Okay, stop.
Catherine Toure, you two are people of color, allegedly. Is the racism that we actually face in day-to-day life as scary as people like Jordan Peele like to project onto the screen? Is this even a good allegory of what racism feels like? How much racism do you guys face that is actually frightening compared to something economic precarity?
Mm.
To Catherine, I'll start with you.
How
You live
much
in
racism do I actually face that's actually scary?
because you live in Irvine.
On a day, like in the present time or when, like in the past?
Like 1857.
I don't know. Okay, so when I went to Mount Vernon High School and everyone called me names because the African American girls rightfully saw that I did not qualify to wear a training bra yet, that was scary. But on a day-to-day basis, yeah, there's like the last time I felt like I was really scared for someone else was when I saw a white lady yelling at a Chinese lady on a New York subway.
Mhm.
And but like the day-to-day frightening thing about capitalism is much scarier than racism because I'm protected now by my age, by where I live, by all this other stuff. Um, I don't. Jordan Peele, is he trying to say that racism is the horror, the core of the horror film? Maybe, but the thing that I wanted to say about this was that this is getting where I wanted to say his white people. He's got white people all wrong. I'll just keep it at that.
Oh, this is gonna get good. To Raven said, look at he's like, oh, let me get a pin out.
Yeah.
Gotta take
It's a
notes.
class. It's a
That's what it
class
is.
thing. It's not
Right.
like people being white are scary. It's like he's trying to make rich people in Get Out look really terrifying. They're actually like blood sucking, soul sucking vampires. But I, I feel like rich people are really scary these days. Rich people are actually really scary.
Sid Nanda says, I would have watched Get Out a third time. That's a joke because remember the dad says I would have voted for Obama a third time.
Mm.
Toure, racism and its reality. I mean, we talked about Get Out, and you made an interesting point about Get Out. It's a movie that you actually enjoy.
I did, and I guess my discomfort with the film is harmonizes with Catherine's insofar as I like the film very much. Partly because I don't think I'd ever seen anyone take an interracial relationship as the jump off point for horror. And going home when you're a young person to meet your significant other's family can just be scary, no matter if race is an issue or not. But certainly in that context, it would have been. But what bugged me about the film initially was less the film and the audience reaction, where many people seem to have been taken by the notion that white people want to appropriate black people. But the film made plain that it was upscale white people, right? So this is in step with what Catherine was saying. And these kind of white elites got off on appropriating black bodies. And there's something to that. Obviously it's the horror show ridiculous version of that. But nevertheless, what threw me off was apparently Jordan Peele hadn't thought about it in terms of class. He had thought about it, as Catherine said, just like much like the audience, in terms of race. As far as and race, period, right? Whereas it would clearly be race and class, or just class, as Catherine was saying, but certainly not race, period, right? Um, as on this matter of the quotidian experiences of Black people or people of color and racism, and whether or not they're scary, I don't know about scary as much as infuriating. Some of the most outrageous experiences that I've had over, let's say, the last year were definitely racist experiences, but they weren't anything that was going to, result in my going to prison or being murdered or anything. It was sort of the ironic racism of liberal white anti-racist, right? And that's illustrative of my class position. The last time I really had to deal with racists on a regular basis as peers was in my 20s. Insofar like classic racist, not racist, anti-racist, but like as I mentioned before, David Duke voters. I was in my 20s when I had to work with those people, and they were horrifying. But interestingly enough, the liberal white anti-racists that I've had to deal with in recent years were just as racist. And they're in many ways much more infuriating because they were well educated, they're enlightened, and of course because they had read How to Be an Anti-Racist and everything that Robin DiAngelo had ever written, they convinced themselves that stereotyping people of color positively wasn't racist. So you couldn't say, so this is really racist, the stuff that you're saying, things that you believe, as I told them within a couple of weeks of meeting them, because they professed to be sensitive to those issues, and it couldn't hear it, right? So the quotidian experiences, at least in my adult life or recent adult life, have been more infuriating than scary.
Can I?
Of
I
course.
just remembered my probably most like intense encounter with um, a racist as an adult was when I received hate mail when I was an assistant professor from probably someone who was a senior professor because they'd
Mhm.
seen all my files.
Wow.
And I had gotten a multicultural grant. This was the 90s when multiculturalism was really great. And he said, and she got a multicultural grant, and we should be ashamed of ourselves for hiring her. She's a complete sham. And it was an anonymous letter that was slipped under my door. And you know what? I was furious. Actually, when Toure said the anger thing, I was like, oh yeah, I wasn't scared. I was furious. I wanted to confront him, but there were so many different layers of bureaucracy. Like I was told I wouldn't, I shouldn't do it. I shouldn't just I was like, I wanted to just say to him, like, what the hell is this? You're a complete sham. By the way, he's like still an associate professor. He was a complete fucking blowhard, never got promoted, couldn't write a thing, but he wanted to like call me out for being like a fake scholar and an affirmative action hire. And that was but what it was, all the everyone else was white too. Their fear was what was really infuriating to me. They kept saying, don't do anything, let HR do anything. They did nothing. No one did anything. I thought like the dean was going to come and talk to us about how we can't behave this way. They did nothing. They swept it under the rug. And I was willing to go toe to toe with them and say, "Did you send this to me?" They didn't bring it up in a faculty meeting. They pretended it didn't happen. So I don't think like your normal white academic gets hate mail when they're an assistant professor. But when I've talked to a number of women, sort of women of color, people have actually, this happens to us. And it's like what's infuriating about it is you don't get to confront people because of your university bureaucracy. And I was too young to realize how it was going to play out. And I should have just said, you know what, you're full of shit.
Well,
But
You
can
want
I
to
can I piggyback off
that was
Catherine's point?
horrible. Yeah.
Because I've had 4 workplace incidents total. One that I've mentioned, from last year, and one when I was an assistant professor, and it sort of been between my first and second year, and I'd written about that one in a piece that I wrote in Jacobin, why I'm still thinking about Amy Cooper. Then I had another one in which I had to file a complaint with the office of the relevant office. I don't want to say what the office name, but go through the bureaucracy
Right.
to file a complaint against the dean for creating a hostile work environment for me.
And what happened?
I kind of won that, but I'll come right back to that. And then in around that time, because it's evidence of the hostile work environment, I cursed out a colleague who I do not speak with.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say what year, but it's been a long time
Mm-hmm.
since that incident. And then, of course, the most recent was in the last year. And that one, the most recent one, was less about me personally, right? The one that Catherine mentioned was about her, and the other 3 that I referenced were also about me. But the one last year wasn't about me personally. It was some committee work. But in all 4 of those incidents, I confronted the person, right? In the first incident, it was a white woman who I'd seen do some really heinous stuff to a Middle Eastern colleague of mine. And I was super cautious about how I approached her. I strategized and talked to friends of mine, many of them white, for weeks about how best to approach this issue, for fear that she would turn me into Bigger Thomas. So I walked in backing up, right, in that confrontation. In the case where I reported the dean, that obviously went through a bureaucratic process, but I had to be professional the whole time, of course. And the instance where I cursed out the colleague, obviously I didn't handle that in the traditional professional way, but I'd laughed off for years the disrespectful stuff he had put at my feet. I just figured, he was the douchebag is how I looked at it. And that disrespect, like your colleague, was about him and his insecurities that he was projecting onto me. But there was a bridge too far. And I couldn't, my blackness would not allow me to accommodate that bullshit at that point, right? And interestingly enough, even when you approach it, when you confront people, the outcomes aren't necessarily what you'd want them to be. Going through the bureaucratic process was in many ways the most satisfying, not emotionally, but it's much more difficult, I think, to cast someone who handles those problems professionally, going through the bureaucracy, as a malcontent. But that happens, right? I mean, so when you confront these people professionally or not professionally, either way, then the people in the periphery or the person even that you have reported will cast you, the victim, as a malcontent, right? So that, again, is not so much scary as it is infuriating.
It's not scary at all.
No.
And one of the things that this guy did was he was a bully, and he would try to scare people in the department, and people were scared. This was at the University. He was like 6'4".
Like
They're
hide
like
behind
Minnesota
doors,
nice
or
guys. No, just yelling, just like really being loud. When you're a 6'4" guy and you yell at, women who are tiny, and the men who are, not so assertive, that he intimidated everyone in the department. And I thought, this is not, I didn't want to play that game, but I was
Yeah.
actually literally told, you can't change a bully, so it's best to just leave that part of the playground to him. And they transferred me from the department.
that's
I'm
what
serious.
the school said.
This is what the HR person said, and they transferred me out of the department
They talked
be
to
away
you
from
like a grade school vice principal.
like a large, white woman from Minnesota,
Oh,
who was just like, they have
I just lost
all the
Minnesota.
all
Continue.
the weapons of passive aggression, and they just wanted me to adopt those weapons. I mean, Toure, it's cold comfort to me. It's some comfort to me to know that there isn't like some kind of catharsis if I had confronted him. But I always think like the cutting off of my instincts, the trying to protect me, but actually but I didn't file a complaint because it was anonymous, right?
Right.
So I had to report it to the police,
Mm-hmm.
but there was nothing that was done. There was no investigation, nothing. And so I actually never filed a complaint in the university against anyone, thinking that there was going to be some kind of process where the dean or somebody, the chair, was going to talk about how, this kind of behavior is not acceptable. And they
Right.
kept telling me, we'll take care of it.
Well,
And they didn't.